Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now when it comes to Dragon Ball, it's more often than not known for its eclectic and varied range of fighters, warriors, and martial artists. I mean, of course, it's an action comedy, why wouldn't it be? But aside from its most obvious cast of strong guys and gals, Dragon Ball is surprisingly filled with brilliant scientists. No joke. A substantial amount of goodies and baddies within this series are intelligent. And I'm not talking about the brilliant SAIYANTIST Bardock either, thankfully. For a start, we have Bulma, Dr. Briefs, Dr. Frappe, Dr. Wheelo, Dr. Kochin, Dr. Gero and his partner Vomi. Still can't believe Toriyama named her that. As well as the Android 21, who is based on her, Dr. Papparoni from Universe 3, Dr. Miyuu from GT, Dr. Lychee from the Hatchiyack special, that guy, the guy what is famous for Haverok's favourite still from Dragon Ball ever, for all the wrong reasons. And if you really want to be pernickety, you could also include Dr. Slump in there, because technically he does exist in the Dragon world. Anyway, these aren't all of them, but at least some of the more prominent examples going. We haven't referred to even the likes of the Tuffles and Universe 3 as a whole. But the main point of this discussion is that there are a lot of smart people in Dragon Ball. I think we've found someone who's even better than them, who might even be smarter than Bulma. Since the very beginning of the series, in fact, of Bulma being the smartest being out there, any organic entity could not come close to this gal. But no, here comes a mighty warrior, or scientist. This young prodigy started his path towards genius at the early age of 14, and by the age of 24, he already has a PhD. Most likely, multiple PhDs. That's right. Today we're going to talk about the newest doctor to enter the pantheon of Dragon Ball, Dr. Hedo. But wait, Masako, you already talked about this guy in another video, why do it again? Well, that's partially true. We have touched upon this character before in a different video, but we now know so much more about this character than we did back then that we feel that we can go over him again in more detail. And honestly, when we did find out more about Dr. Hedo, it really took us by surprise. We didn't expect there to be this much going for Hedo. We thought he was going to be just your typical movie villain, a one and done kind of thing, and then after this movie is done, you'll never hear about him again. We expected him to be a young, misguided prodigy, a being who is immensely talented and brilliant, but who allied himself with the wrong people. But what we didn't expect was that he was to be a natural fit for the organization anyway. For him to be the descendant of Gero's bloodline. And also, on top of that, his personality, which was a bit of a shock to say the least. When we first saw the previews, we expected one of two likely personas for Hedo to have been generated. First, we expected a meek, shy, and a little shady individual. Somebody who didn't get out much and was in general quite short and sharp with those he viewed inferior to him. And it didn't help that he was short either. The other persona that we had in mind was, oh, he's just a straight up arrogant jerk. Since he was going to be just in this movie, we first thought, it wouldn't matter too much about what he's like, oh, he'll get his comeuppance because he's mean. But no, we got neither of those really. Instead, for Hedo, we got a brave badass. Let's be honest. He's quite an ambitious young man. A young man, mind you, who was in charge of proceedings the entire time. Sort of like a parallel to Pan in a way. Despite people worrying about Pan being the maiden or damsel in distress, she and Piccolo were in cahoots the entire time. Pan was at no point in any danger. Even that one time that she almost got blasted, she was able to fly away, she did that all by herself. Same goes for Hedo. You think that he's been played, but he played them. He knew what he was getting himself into in this movie, playing Magenta and Carmine for a bunch of saps. They thought they had the upper hand. They had no hands, they got handed. Oh, he didn't care that he was being viewed as a tool. He got to make cool stuff, and that's all that mattered to him. He chose to work with this arrangement, and because of that, he was able to make his ideal droids, Gamma 1 and 2. Droids which, as we'll talk about more later, were the ideal models that made him happy. He got to emulate a childhood fantasy. There's also another thing to consider here, which makes Hedo even more striking and significant. Usually, when you have an overweight and kind of nerdy character, they are played out more for laughs and rarely get serious treatment. If you go back to the 90s especially, in most of the blockbusters at the time, the scientist or inventor in those movies is rather portly, a very clumsy individual, and the only good thing going for them were their minds. Think Jurassic Park, Richie Rich to name but just 2 examples. The biggest testament to this train of thought particularly is when people are asked about a major overweight character who genuinely has an important role in a series that isn't meant to be some kind of comedy relief. People usually first think of Hugo Hurley-Reyes from Lost. Granted, that's a good example. But Lost isn't exactly current. Surely there could have been better and more recent examples, right? And sure, both Hugo and Hedo have some comical fat guy traits, but these traits do not define them as characters, and both get to do badass things anyway. They're great blokes who just so happen to be carrying a little bit of weight is all. That's what Hav and I try to do with our characters, by the way. We don't define our characters around their physical characteristics, like with Ranch, for example. She is a cool and tough warrior who just so happens to be a woman. It doesn't define her. She's a neat gal, just a neat person to be around. But back to this whole weight debate, it's quite interesting, especially in Hedo's case, when you still have fat Gotenks in the same movie being made fun of in the movie. Surely that renders our thoughts moot, right? Well, not quite. There has been some progress. This has been the first time I can remember where Fat Gotenks actually does something helpful in a battle against a beast, doing meaningful damage. So, points for that. At least he can do stuff instead of just lumbering around as a goof with absolute zero power. And sure, Dr. Hedo does love his milk and Oreos. They even actually made a custom milk Oreo cup to celebrate the movie. Bit of an unusual merchandise, but okay. But hey, come on, we like milk and Oreos. Most people do. A lot of people do. Besides, this quirk is never played out to some grotesque effect or as some kind of overt gag of like, oh, I think you should be laying off the cookies there, Dr. Hedo. You're getting a little bit tubby. No, it's just a little thing. He just likes milk and cookies. It's a reference to his grandmother's sweet tooth, if anything. He just likes it, that's all. Let him have those in peace, alright? I actually remember all the things with Champa and Vados, the whole calorie counting thing. Granted, they didn't really make too much of a reference thing, but maybe you can also include Champa into this. If Vomi had that trait in her android copy, then it stands to reason why Hedo would have a sweet tooth as well. Hedo is also obsessed with superheroes, as was described from the very beginning of our understanding of the movie when we first saw that preview clip. At first, we reckoned it was some infantile and overly creepy obsession, but no. He just likes superhero movies and is a fan of them. Like most people. He really wants to do good for the world, rather than following his grandfather's legacy to the letter, which he claims caused a lot of troubles for himself and his parents. That in itself is quite fascinating. It seems that for Hedo's parents, being associated with Dr. Gero was more of a hindrance than a help in life. It most likely left his family ostracized from many communities, brandished as evildoers just because of their connection, who were associated with the Red Ribbon Army, maybe unnecessarily. Or quite simply, they were just bad guys period, people thought. Granted, Gero wanted to better humanity, but he tried to do it in a manner which was simply not elegant, nor philanthropic. As noted by several people online, I wish to point out this. Hedo not only based his outfit on his favourite superhero, but also seemingly based Gamma 1's design on another hero, perhaps a sidekick to his idol. That in itself is very intriguing. Perhaps that's why Gamma 1 is so serious and straight-laced. He must have based Gamma 1 on the serious and loyal sidekick that his hero had, because he wanted to emulate his idol almost down to a T. As for Gamma 2, he might have been fictitious. He might have chosen Hedo, a more eccentric and expressive personality, to act as the foil to his sidekick. A sidekick for his sidekick. Gamma 2's just like, yeah, we're gonna take you down, alright, yeah? Stop talking, please, Gamma 1 would say. After all, Dragon Ball likes to have double acts, going all the way back to Mai and Shu, who often did stuff together for Pilaf. This is a continuation of that consistent Dragon Ball trope, the biggest example being, of course, Vegeta and Nappa. On top of this, Hedo, unlike Gero, also shows genuine concern and fondness for his creations, and wants them to do good and save people, whilst not being all that happy about the development of Cell Max, because he was sort of forced to. Gero didn't care about his android creations at all, only that they did his bidding. whereas his grandson does give a damn about them. Even Cell Max to a degree, not wanting him to be released before he was done. Sure, he didn't want to make this creature, but it was a condition that he was willing to accept so as to bring to life his ideal Gamma troop. Later on, Hedo did ultimately admit that he was aware that the army was using him, but you can guess that he hoped that he could use the army's resources to then create something good, perhaps ingratiate himself into designing tech that could benefit humanity in a benevolent way, steer them perhaps to the right path, thinking that he was doing something justified. But alas, Magenta was too much like his father, and it all led to catastrophe with Cell Max being released, far too early for anyone's liking, and possibly dooming Earth to near destruction. Had it not been for Orange Piccolo, and of course, Gohan Beast, that would have been it. Admittedly, Hedo might have thought that fighting against the Z-Team was a kind of evil versus evil situation. Like, who was going to be the ultimate evil on the planet? But maybe the Dragon Team were, in his mind, the lesser evil. A lot of things that they do might be a little misguided, sure, but they weren't doing this in a malicious manner, unlike Red Ribbon. And we haven't even mentioned that his research allowed him to make his skin bulletproof, and that Hachimaru, his wasp drone, can possibly be the most dangerous accessory in the entire series. After all, Hachimaru is able to spy on people effectively, having spied on Carmine and Magenta from before Hedo being released from jail, and was the one to kill Magenta with that poison dart. In short, Hachimaru could be upgraded further to provide more assistance, being our version of Frost with his little poison powers. The best thing about this character though, is that he ends up living at the tail end of the movie, working with Capsule Corp alongside Gamma 1, which makes him a new member of the Dragon Team by proxy. When you look to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot the video game, that trait is all the more poignant. In that game, Vomi worked at one time for Capsule Corp, known then as the female researcher, so it seems fitting that her grandson would one day walk the halls of Bulma's company for himself. And we really hope that they will utilise him in future sagas, instead of just being sent off to another department and never heard from again. You never know, Dragon Ball does like to do that with some of its characters. Why do that to Hedo? He could be extremely useful. Not only can he be the gadgets guy for the team, being their Q, and providing them with useful stuff that could get them out of tight spots that fists can't extricate themselves from, but he could also give 17 and 18 some compelling upgrades, bringing them back into relevancy like with other cast members. Maybe these upgrades could help him leave his grandfather's legacy behind for good. Maybe he can form a friendship with Marin. Who knows? Having another scientist on deck, especially one this brilliant, could really enrich the team, and hopefully he won't be made into a background character. And if you consider that this is a 24-year-old guy, even with the massive resources of Red Ribbon Pharmaceuticals to hand, him being able to create warriors capable of taking on Gohan and Piccolo on the first bounce, that's gotta count for something, yeah? He left Gero behind in terms of genius, and we're not even sure that he even used the Infinity Engine technology in Gamma 1 and 2. He could have just lifted that from Gero's blueprints, but who knows what this guy is capable of? It's quite exciting, and we hope that we are going to see the effects of his work later on in the series. We also see that he's quite brave, confronting Magenta one-on-one, despite the latter having powered armor to hand, and trying to avert the mess with Cell Max, so it's also a clear possibility that he might not stick to the lab and actually be a field scientist type for future adventures. While Bulma was kinda like this earlier on in Dragon Ball, she then mostly focused on herself and her wants. Hedo though, with his heroic obsession, could be really entertaining to watch, especially if the story takes him to other universes or godly realms wanting to conduct research on the fly. He is one of those characters that we didn't know that we actually needed. At first we took him for a copy of Lord Jaguar, but in reality, he's a really refreshing play on the young science boy trope. I don't think many people could have anticipated that he might be one of the most memorable characters in recent Dragon Ball history. But hey, sometimes it's just that. Characters who try too much can sometimes get the opposite effect befalling them. Feels bad, right buddy? I mean, we still like Granola, we just wish that his story would get to the point. Anyway, Dr. Hedo is one of the elements that makes the plot of Superhero a pure delight. Having another smart character, not ridiculed for his looks and being actually in control, felt fresh and empowering, and we really do hope that it was an introduction to more, rather than just, well, that was it. But what do you think of him? How would you like to see him grow? Which characters would you like Hedo to interact with? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!